"Stop, Papa, the handkerchief is poisoned. Don't touch it." Leila's voice cut through the grand wedding hall like an alarm gasp swept across the cathedral as 400 guests turned toward the last pew, their elegant dresses and tailored suits rustling in confusion at the altar. Jordan Blake stood frozen, one hand halfway to the breast pocket of his tuxedo, where the white silk handkerchief lay carefully folded. He blinked slowly, turning his head toward the girl who had shouted Leila. He said, confused. She was standing now, trembling, her small fists clenched. Her voice cracked again, louder this time. "Please, Papa, don't touch it. It's poisoned. I saw her. She put something on it." The entire sanctuary fell into stunned silence. Jordan took a few steps forward, his face flushing with discomfort. "Sweetheart," he said gently, as if trying to soothe a child mid-tantrum, "come here. It's all right." Leila didn't move. Her eyes were wide, terrified. "You don't understand. I saw her. Do it." "She dipped your handkerchief in something last night in her room. It smelled like chemicals. It burned her hand." "Leila," he sighed, crouching slightly and lowering his voice. "I know this is hard. You're still adjusting. I know you miss your mom, and Natalia isn't trying to replace her. I'm not making this up." She cried, "Please believe me." From the first row, Candace Blake, the ever-pristine older sister of Jordan, shot up with a glare so sharp it could have sliced marble security. She hissed, "Get that child out of here. This is absolutely disgraceful." Natalia, standing beside Jordan in her fitted white lace gown, let out a soft laugh. But there was no joy in it, only calculation. She stepped forward gracefully, placing a delicate hand on Jordan's arm. "It's okay," she said in her smooth, soothing tone. "She's confused. This has been a lot for her. I understand." But Leila's cries didn't stop. They grew louder, breaking through. The heavy veil of suspicion now settling over the guests' murmurs rose, first uncertain, then questioning. Jordan frowned. He turned back to his daughter, a flicker of hesitation crossing his face. "Leila," he said cautiously, "you need to calm down. This isn't the time or place. We can talk after." "No," she interrupted, digging into the little purse slung across her chest with shaking hands. She pulled out a small flash drive and held it high. "Watch this. Please watch this, Papa. It's on the car camera. Simon copied it for me." Natalia's fingers tightened around her bouquet. Leila's voice cracked again. "It shows her. She dipped your handkerchief in something. I saw it with my own eyes. And now it's all on video." All eyes shifted from the little girl to the bride. Natalia's smile faltered, just enough to crack the porcelain illusion. "That's absurd," she said lightly, though her voice tightened at the edges. "This is a child's imagination. Grief does strange things, then prove it." Leila said suddenly, her tone sharp with clarity. She walked slowly down the aisle, her little black patent shoes clicking on the marble floor. "Put on these." She reached into her coat pocket and produced a pair of disposable gloves, the kind Jordan used when cleaning rare books in his study. "Use them to pick up the handkerchief, then wipe her face with it." And just like that, the truth trembled on the edge of silence in that stillness. With a little girl's trembling voice and a pair of gloves, the power in the room began to shift. If her courage touched your heart, leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching this video from, and let's see how far her voice can reach. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories like this, delivered to you every day. The room fell, deadly quiet. Natalia went pale. "Go ahead," Leila whispered. "If it's safe, she won't mind." Jordan stood frozen, torn between two impossibilities. The room seemed to hold its breath. Natalia began, then stopped. Her arms remained limp at her sides. She didn't move. Her smile was gone. A beat passed, then another. Someone coughed in the audience. A guest whispered too loudly. Why wouldn't she just prove it? The spell cracked. Jordan's hands slowly reached for the handkerchief, not with fingers but with the gloves Leila had just handed him. He pulled it free and held it up to the light. That was the moment. Everything began to unravel. And Leila stood there, breathing hard, eyes red, but unblinking. This was only the beginning. Jordan Blake held the handkerchief between his gloved fingers, staring at it as if it had become an alien object, something no longer stitched with memories but pulsing with silent threat. The white silk no longer looked like a symbol of tradition. It looked like a trap. He turned his gaze slowly back to Natalia. "Is it true?" he asked, voice low but firm. Natalia blinked, then let out a soft, incredulous laugh. "Darling, You can't be serious. I'm asking you a question. She drew herself up, her veil trembling with the subtle movement. Her voice remained composed, but her smile had vanished. Of course, not I would. Never. This is absurd. Jordan, she's just a child. She's clearly overwhelmed, but Jordan wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at Leila. She stood in the center aisle, fists still clenched at her sides, shoulders trembling. Her eyes, however, were steady. They held something that froze him more than any accusation ever could. Heartbreak. Not fear, not rage, not even defiance. Just that quiet, wounded look only a child could give when someone they love chooses to doubt them. He'd seen it before in the eyes of his late wife, when he'd missed another dinner, in the eyes of his sister Candace, long before she turned brittle, and now in Leila, a girl who had lost her mother, her home, and now maybe him. Natalia stepped closer, her voice smooth again, rehearsed. Jordan, please, let's go to the vestry. We'll sort this out. Privately, this doesn't have to ruin our day. Leila spoke again, her voice breaking. If you wipe her face with that cloth, you'll know. That's all. That's all. I'm asking. Murmurs echoed louder now, sweeping through the pews like a rising tide. Jordan's longtime business partner, Greg Mitchell, leaned forward from the second row. You know, I've seen that kid grow up, he muttered to Candace. She's sharp as a whip, not a drama queen. Candace rolled her eyes but said nothing. Her jaw was locked tight. Jordan hesitated. The cameras were rolling. Reporters were already whispering headlines into their smart watches. His entire empire was built on control, public perception, message, clarity, narrative flow. But now all that control sat on the tip of a white silk handkerchief. He turned toward the priest, who still stood motionless near the altar. Can you give us a moment? Father, the priest nodded silently, stepping aside as Jordan turned fully to Leila. You said Simon helped. You. Leila nodded, her voice softer. He copied the footage from the car camera. You can ask him. He saw it too. Jordan drew a long, deep breath. Is he here now? She hesitated. He was supposed to be. He might have been stopped. Natalia flinched almost imperceptibly, but Leila saw it. Jordan saw it too. He stepped forward toward Leila, slowly, then looked down at the gloves she'd handed him. You want me to use this cloth on her face? Yes. The silence that followed was louder than any organ note. Jordan looked at the cloth one more time. Then at Natalia, will you allow it? She took a step back. I will not be insulted like this in front of the entire city. That's not an answer, Greg Mitchell called out. Jordan frowned. Natalia, I've asked you if it's harmless. Prove it. She laughed again, brittle. Now, Jordan, you've built your name on trust, on leadership, and now you're letting a child, your emotionally unstable daughter, derail everything we've built. Answer the question. Natalia froze, her expression changed. Not the fluster of a falsely accused woman, not indignation, but calculation. She was weighing odds, not fighting for innocence. And in that moment, Jordan knew the stillness broke with the sound of footsteps. A young man in a black suit, one of the church ushers, came running down the aisle, out of breath. Sir, Mr. Blake, there's been an accident. Simon Hale. They found his car down on 5th and Broad. Someone cut his brake lines. He's in the R at St. Vincent. Leila. Gasp. Jordan steadied. Natalia said nothing. The usher added. They said he asked for you and for Leila. A wave of whispers crashed again. Phones were already buzzing with news. Jordan turned to the priest. Please tell the guest to remain seated. I need to speak with my daughter. He took Leila gently by the arm and led her away from the aisle, down a side passage. Her hand was cold in his, and for the first time, she didn't pull away once they were out of sight. He crouched in front of her. Tell me everything from the beginning. Leila took a breath and started the kitchen hallway. Natalia, dipping the handkerchief, the faint chemical smell, the red marks on her own fingers when she tested it, the leather case. She never let go of the car ride, where Leila overheard the words. No one will suspect a thing if it's slow, if it looks natural. Simon, helping her pull the footage, her plan to show it during the reception, if she couldn't stop the ceremony in time when she finished. Jordan sat back on his heels, staring at the floor. Why didn't you come to me sooner? I tried, Leila said quietly. You didn't. Listen. He closed his eyes. Pain stabbing somewhere deeper than guilt. He had promised her protection, security, a home, but when it mattered, he had dismissed her fears as childish noise. Jordan stood up slowly. We're leaving. What about the wedding? He looked down at her, voice Steady, there isn't going to be one. They returned to the sanctuary, now buzzing with low voices. Natalia stood at the altar, her fingers twitching at her sides. Jordan approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying over the silence. "Thank you all for being here. I deeply appreciate your presence, but this ceremony will not continue." Natalia's face twisted. "You're throwing this away based on that child's." I said, "That's enough." His tone had changed, the boardroom tone, the tone that ended negotiations and won war's security. "Please escort Miss Vega to the waiting area. She is not to leave the premises until questioned." Someone in the back called out, "What about the poison?" Jordan held up the handkerchief. "This will be tested immediately. If it comes back clean, I'll apologize publicly. But if it doesn't," he looked at Natalia. "Then the person I trusted almost murdered me as security." Closed in, Natalia dropped the bouquet. Her eyes met Leila's. For one breathless moment, her mask dropped. What glared back was cold, furious hatred. Then, just like that, she smiled again and allowed herself to be led away as she disappeared down the corridor. Jordan turned back to Leila. She was crying again silently. This time he reached out and pulled her close. "I'm sorry. I didn't believe you," he whispered into her braids, "but I believe you now." In the back of the church, some guests clapped, not politely, not socially, but with raw relief. And for the first time that day, Leila let herself lean into her father's arms, not as a burden, but as someone finally seen and believed. 3 hours after the wedding that never was, Jordan Blake sat in the back seat of his black Lincoln Town Car, the silk handkerchief sealed in a Ziploc bag on the seat. Beside him, his tuxedo jacket lay folded in his lap, his tie loosened, and a silence hung over the interior that even the city traffic outside couldn't break. Leila sat next to him, shoulders hunched, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. She hadn't said much since they left the cathedral. She'd barely touched the juice someone had handed her back in the rectory, and when the press had swarmed the front steps, she'd instinctively backed behind Jordan's legs as, if afraid to be visible again, he glanced over at her, noticing how small. She looked 9 years old, but carrying something far heavier than any child should. "We're going to the hospital," he said gently, watching her flinch just slightly at the sound of his voice to see. "Simon," she nodded, but didn't speak. "Do you want to tell me more about the video?" he added after a moment. Leila hesitated, then dug into her little purse and pulled out the flash drive again. She held it out to him like it was sacred. "Simon made 2 copies," she whispered, in case. "Something happened to him." Jordan took it carefully. "And this has everything." She nodded. "From the car cam, the day before the wedding. She didn't know it was recording. She was on the phone saying she couldn't wait anymore, that the timeline was perfect, that the handkerchief would make it look natural." A muscle in Jordan's jaw twitched. He stared straight ahead, lips pressed thin. She said, "By the time people figured it out, it'd be too late to trace." Leila added, she said, 800 million was worth waiting for. Jordan turned to her, slowly, eyes narrowing. "She said that exact amount." Leila nodded. His temples throbbed. That number wasn't public. The value of his media holdings, his private accounts, even the terms of his revised, well, only a handful of people knew it. He'd updated the documents 2 weeks ago to include Natalia as a beneficiary. He swallowed hard. She knew she did. Leila whispered. They arrived at St. Vincent's through the side entrance. Bypassing reporters camped by a security guard, let them in quietly, and within minutes they were standing outside Simon's room. The old driver lay in the bed, a neck brace keeping his head straight, one arm in a sling, but his eyes lit up when he saw them. "Boss," Simon said with a strained smile. Keto. Leila rushed to his bedside, grabbing his free hand. "You're okay. I'm in one piece," he said, bit stitched, a little cracked, "but I've been worse back in 72. Jordan stepped forward, cutting him off softly. "Simon, thank you for everything." Simon nodded slowly. "You saw it." "Not yet. Leila told me what's on it." "Then you'll want to watch it soon." Simon said, "It's convincing. I believe her." Jordan said, "I believe both of you." Now Simon's eyes softened. "Took you long enough." That earned the faintest laugh from Leila. "I need to be sure," Jordan said, "not just for my safety, but for her protection. If this goes to court, if that woman's working with anyone, she is." Simon interrupted. "I overheard one of her calls. She mentioned backup plans, plural. She wasn't acting alone. She was too calm, too prepared. This wasn't her first time. Jordan straightened. She ever name anyone, not clearly, but I remember her saying, "Tell Dimitri it's on track." Dimitri, Jordan repeated. No last name, but she used it like she expected him to know what it meant. Leila let out a soft gasp. I think I've heard that name. Both men turned to her twice. She said once when she was on the phone in the hallway, she said it really fast like she didn't want anyone to hear. And once in the kitchen, she dropped her phone and I picked it up. The last text had a name at the top, Dimitri, and then it disappeared. Jordan exhaled. This goes deeper than I thought. He pulled a USB reader from his briefcase and plugged the flash drive into his laptop, turning it towards Simon's tray table. Leila and Simon both leaned forward. Watching the screen come to life, the car footage began, crisp, clear, time-stamped. Natalia entered the vehicle in her usual elegance, settling into the back seat. While on the phone, her voice was cheery at first, but the moment she thought she was alone, it changed. It's in the lining, she said, soaked into the fibers. He'll start sweating. First, then the dizziness. It'll look like heat exhaustion by the time they run. Any tests, I'll be arranging the funeral. Jordan froze. The footage continued. She reached into her designer purse and pulled out the embroidered handkerchief, laying it flat on her knee. Then from a small glass vial, she added a few more drops of a clear liquid to the center. She didn't even flinch. This time just dabbed at the edges with a tissue and folded it like a gift. Perfect. She whispered on the video, he'll die holding the thing. His wife gave him. How poetic. Leila looked away. Simon's hand tightened slightly. Jordan said nothing for a long moment. Then, finally, he closed the laptop. She would have done it. He muttered, she would have. Let me die at the altar. No, Leila whispered. She wouldn't have waited. Jordan raised an eyebrow. She had a backup plan. I think she was going to do something worse at the reception when people were dancing, when no one would see. Jordan looked at her for a long time. You said she burned herself when she tested it. Yes, the skin on her fingers turned red. Do you still have that video? Leila hesitated, then shook her head. She deleted it from her phone. I saw her right after I caught her testing it. I was too scared to stop her. You did enough, Simon said. Firmly, you saw what grown adults missed. You saved his life. No, Leila whispered. I just didn't want to lose another dad. The words struck Jordan in the chest. He hadn't thought of himself that way. Not really. He was her guardian, her provider, her late mother's dying wish, but not her father. Until now, he moved closer, knelt beside her, and gently touched her hand. You didn't lose me. Leila, you saved me, and from now on, I will not just hear you, I will listen. Tears welled in her eyes. A knock interrupted them. A detective in a charcoal suit stepped into the doorway, flipping open a badge. Mr. Blake, I'm Detective Fields. I need to ask you and Miss Bennett a few questions. Jordan rose. We're ready. The detective nodded. First off, thank you for preserving that footage. Second, we just got word. Miss Natalia Vega isn't who she claims. Her real name is Ilsa Vulov. Interpol's been looking for her for 5 years. Leila's eyes widened. She's been connected to 3 deaths in Europe. Fields continued. All men, all wealthy, all natural causes. Until now, this footage will crack the case wide open. Is she still in custody? Jordan asked. Yes, but she's lawyering up and fast. She's not saying a word. She won't have to. Simon muttered. Her eyes said plenty. Fields nodded. We're arranging protection detail for Leila. If this is part of a network, there could be risk. Jordan didn't hesitate. I want armed security at the house. No exceptions. We'll handle it. As the detective walked away, Leila looked up at Jordan. Does this mean it's over? He paused, then answered, honestly, no. It means we're finally fighting back. And Leila, tired, bruised but unbroken, nodded. She was ready. The following morning dawned cold and gray over Manhattan, as if the city itself had sensed the weight of betrayal that hung over the Blake estate. Jordan stood by the window in his home office, a mug of untouched black coffee cooling in his hands. Downstairs, Leila was finishing her breakfast under the quiet protection of 2 armed guards dressed in civilian clothes. One sat near the foyer, pretending to read a newspaper. The other monitored a live security feed from the guest bedroom. Jordan had hastily converted into a command center. He hadn't slept. He'd replayed the footage from Simon's car over and over again, memorizing every word, every smirk on Natalia, No, Ilsa's face. He'd trusted that woman opened his heart after 10 years of grieving his late wife, and she would have let him die right there at the altar in front of Leila. His grip tightened on the mug. Just then, a soft knock came at the door. "Come in," he said. Not turning, Leila stepped inside, clutching a small drawing in her hand. "I made this," she said quietly. Jordan turned and saw a crayon sketch, 3 figures holding hands, one tall man in a suit, one girl in pigtails, and a third person with a heart drawn on her chest crossed out in red. "It's us," she said before and after he knelt beside her. "That's very brave of you. I don't want her near us again. She won't be." Leila hesitated. Then, "Why are there men outside?" "Because people like her don't act." Alone Detective Fields thinks someone else may still be watching. Her eyes widened. "Like who? I don't know yet, but I intend to find out later that afternoon." Detective Fields returned this time with a folder thick with documents. "We pulled financials on Ilsa," he said, setting the file on the table. "Offshore accounts, shell companies, untraceable phone records. But there's one name that keeps showing up." He flipped the folder open and pointed to a highlighted section. "Dmitry Vasilov, Russian-American ties to several consulting firms, which is code for laundering operations. We've had eyes on him for years, but nothing's stuck." Jordan leaned over the file. "And what's his connection to Ilsa?" "Unclear, but we have evidence. They were in Prague together 3 years ago under aliases, and your name showed up in one of his recent calls, encrypted but flagged." "So I'm a target," Jordan said flatly. "Likely," Fields replied. "But not just you, Leila, too." Jordan's stomach nodded. "Why her? She's a witness. And Dmitry doesn't leave loose ends." Fields laid down a new photo. It was grainy, taken from a street cam in Brooklyn. A tall man in a leather coat, short gray beard, sunglasses. "Despite the cloudy sky taken yesterday," he said, outside Leila's school. Jordan's blood ran cold. "He didn't approach anyone," Fields said, "but he waited there for 10 minutes, then left. We're still tracking the plates on the black Mercedes he got into." "I want Leila pulled from school immediately," Jordan said. "Private tutoring, round-the-clock guards." Fields nodded. "We've already spoken with the Board of Education. They're authorizing emergency homeschool clearance." Downstairs, Leila sat quietly with Simon, the old man, arm still in a sling. "Had insisted on staying at the estate." "I don't like this," she whispered me. "Neither," Simon replied. "But you're safe here, and you're not alone. I heard them say that man came to my school." Simon looked at her eyes, firm but kind. "He didn't get to you. That's what matters." "But what? If he tries again, then he'll learn a hard lesson about underestimating the little girl who stopped a murder plot." Leila smiled faintly. Later that night, after Jordan made a series of urgent phone calls, he entered his private vault room. Inside, he removed an old wooden box, dusty, untouched for over a decade. Inside were photographs, an old journal, a dog tag, and a small velvet pouch. He stared at the dog tag for a long moment. Blake Jordan, O+ Marine Force. Reckon he had locked that part of himself away when his wife died. But now, it was time to remember who he had been. The next morning, he visited Leila in the garden. She was sitting on a stone bench, watching the kufish. He knelt beside her, placing a small pendant into her hand. "This used to be mine," he said. "It has a GPS tracker built in. If you ever feel scared, just squeeze it like magic." He smiled. "Better than magic. It talks to satellites." She squeezed it and grinned. But later that day, the shadows returned. A package arrived addressed to Leila. The return address was blank. The staff, trained and cautious, scanned it and called Jordan immediately. He arrived just as the bomb squad confirmed there was no explosive. Just a single envelope inside. Jordan opened it, heart hammering. Inside was a photo, an old one of his wife, pregnant, standing beside a man Jordan didn't recognize. On the back, in looping cursive, "Do you really know what she kept from you?" Jordan's heart stopped. He stared at the photo for a long time, then slid it into his pocket. That night, long after Leila had gone to sleep, he sat alone in the study. Fields was gone. The guards were posted, but he felt utterly exposed. He took the photo out again, the man in the picture. He looked familiar, not from life, but from files. News clippings. A man accused of espionage in the nines declared dead in 2001, but no body was ever found. And now this Jordan dialed a number he hadn't used in 15 years. A gruff voice answered. "You better not be joking. It's Blake." He said, "I need you to pull a favor." Silence. "Then you've got 10 seconds. I need a full background check on Ilsa Vulov, including any known associates in US intelligence, and I need it fast. You in trouble, Jordan? Not yet. But I'm about to be the voice. Grunted, I'll call you back in 2 hours. Jordan hung up across the hall. Leila slept soundly, but her dreams were restless. She saw the church again. The guests frozen in fear. The moment, her father looked at her and didn't believe her. The ache in her chest had returned, that cold space where her mother used to be, where trust used to live. She turned over in bed and whispered into the dark, "Don't let him stop believing me again." But she wasn't the only one awake across the city in a rented penthouse. Ilsa Vulov paced like a lioness in a cage. Her ankle monitor blinked red and her lips curled into a snarl. She picked up the burner phone and dialed Plan B. She said into the receiver, "Execute." Then she smiled, cold and sharp this time. The girl won't be so lucky. It was 3:00 a.m. when the phone rang. Jordan jerked, upright, heart pounding before his mind could catch up. The caller ID flashed a string of digits, scrambled secure. He answered on the first ring. Blake, a low voice. On the other end, I ran the check. Jordan got to his feet, moving to the window, staring out at the city lights that shimmered like a sea of lies. Ilsa Vulov, the voice said, isn't just a con artist. She's a recruiter. For what? For Project Hades' Black Ops program, dismantled in 2009 officially. But you and I both know what dismantled means. Jordan's jaw tightened. She lured foreign assets, seduced them, blackmailed, then married them, always with a longer game. You were just next on the list, and Dmitri, he runs the cleanup. There was a pause. One more thing. I traced that photo. You got the pregnant woman in it. That wasn't your wife. Jordan's blood froze. It was Ilsa from 15 years ago, pregnant with Dmitri's child. That girl you thought was your daughter. Leila is not biologically yours. Jordan stumbled back as if struck. The phone nearly slipped from his grip. You, okay? The voice asked. He didn't answer. I'll send the full report encrypted, but you need to decide fast. If she's not your daughter, you may be her only protector left. The line went dead at sunrise. Jordan sat at the dining table, his untouched coffee steaming in front of him. Leila skipped into the room in her fuzzy slippers, hugging her sketch pad to her chest. I drew us again, she said, eyes bright. He looked up slowly, his heart broke in half. She looked so much like the girl in that old photo. Leila, he said gently. Do you remember anything from before you came to live here? She blinked. Just a lady with yellow hair. She used to give me chocolate coins. But that's it. Jordan nodded slowly. He reached across the table, took her small hand in his. You know, I love you, right? That won't ever change. Her smile widened. I love you too, Daddy. But inside his world was breaking apart by late morning. The house was under tighter surveillance. Agent Fields returned with new intel and concern darkening. His usually steady face, we've been monitoring. Known Vasilov assets. One of them used a burner phone to access a pediatric medical file. Leila's file. Jordan's gaze turned to steel. How much did they access? Everything. Birth history, DNA records, adoption documents. They're trying to figure out what you know and what I don't. Fields hesitated. I'd advise you prepare for the worst. If this is about control, about legacy, then Ilsa's not done. They may not want Leila back, they may want her gone. Jordan stood abruptly. Then we go on a fence. How he walked to his desk, opened a hidden compartment, and pulled out a key. We take Leila to where this all started. The drive to Vermont was long, winding through forests painted gold and crimson with early autumn. Leila fell asleep in the back seat, her arms curled around a stuffed bear. Jordan watched her in the rear view mirror, haunted by the memory of that photo. The news that kept unraveling everything he believed. Fields rode shotgun, flipping through files. There's a clinic in Bar, he said, supposedly shut down after a malpractice scandal. But it was also a front for Project Hades rumor. Has it? Ilsa gave birth there, and if we find records, Jordan asked, then we confirm lineage. More importantly, we find out what they want from Leila. They arrived at the clinic by noon. The building was boarded up. Graffiti streaked across the brickwork, windows smashed, but the basement remained untouched. Behind a rusted door, Fields found a keypad. He punched in a code he claimed to have gotten from an old contact at Langley. The door hissed open inside. The air was thick with mildew and time. Old hospital beds lined the walls, metal drawers half open, charts scattered. Jordan moved toward a locked cabinet and forced it open. Inside were files neatly stacked, alphabetized fields scanned, the folders Volkov-Vulov. He pulled one here. He handed it to Jordan. Inside were ultrasound scans, blood work, hospital, wristbands, and one photo. Ilsa holding a newborn. The baby had a tiny birthmark on her left wrist. Jordan's breath caught. He knew that mark. Leila had it too, so it's true. He whispered. Fields looked grim. Which means they'll come not for you, but for her. That night, back in New York, Ilsa sat in a luxury suite with Dmitry Vasilov seated across from her. She wore a silky black dress, but her eyes were cold steel. They took her out of the city, she said to Vermont, and Dmitry poured vodka into 2 glasses. Then we follow. She knows too much, Ilsa added, and he's remembering who he used to be. Dmitry raised a glass. Let him, it won't matter. The girls are leverage, and Jordan Blake is still a man with something to lose. He took a sip. She didn't. Instead, she stood and stared out the window down at the glowing city. This ends at the gala. She said. What gala? She turned back, smiling. Jordan's annual foundation event, his precious tribute to his late wife. He'd never cancel it. Dmitry's inviting it. And if he does show up, Ilsa said, we finish what we started, before the girl screams. Again, meanwhile, in Vermont, Leila stood in the woods just outside the clinic, staring up at the stars. Jordan approached her, draping a warm coat over her shoulders, cold a little. She said. They stood in silence for a long time. Do you miss her? Leila asked suddenly. Who? My mom, my real mom. Jordan looked at her, then knelt. I don't know her, but I miss your laugh when it's not here. I miss your questions when you're quiet. I miss you when you're not near me, and that's what a dad does. Leila, her eyes brimmed with tears. Even if I'm not really yours, he touched her cheek. You're mine in every way that counts. She burst into tears, collapsing into his arms. He held her for a long, long time under the stars, but just beyond the tree line, the red beam of a sniper scope swept silently across the darkness, settling for a split second on the back of Jordan's head. Then it vanished. The hunter had seen enough, and the game had only just begun. The lights of the Manhattan skyline sparkled, like a lie dressed in diamonds inside the Blake Foundation's ballroom. The chandeliers dripped elegance, illuminating rows of powerful men and women in black tie finery. They moved with poise and polished smiles, unaware of the storm. Tightening its grip around them, Jordan stood near the grand entrance, dressed in a classic tuxedo, his posture composed, but coiled. His eyes scanned the room, noting faces, watching for shadows. Leila wasn't there. She was miles away, under heavy security, tucked safely in a cabin upstate with agent Fields and a pair of trusted operatives. At least that's what he hoped. Tonight was bait. He greeted donors and shook hands with dignitaries, all while his thoughts burned. If Ilsa and Dmitry were going to make a move, this would be it. The place was riddled with cameras, bodyguards, and silent alarms, but Jordan knew monsters like them didn't walk through doors. They slipped through cracks, sir, a voice murmured from behind him. One of his personal security guards stepped close, whispering. The woman you asked us to track. She just entered through the rear garden alone. Jordan turned slowly. Ilsa. The man nodded, dressed like a guest carrying a small handbag. No weapon detected. No weapon doesn't mean no danger. Jordan said, keep eyes on her. No engagement. Unless I signal. As he moved toward the rear of the ballroom, his heartbeat slowed. Instead of speeding up, it always did before the fire. He stepped through the side doors into the garden, lanterns swaying gently above a marble path. There near the roses stood Ilsa. She wore midnight blue, her hair swept back in effortless elegance. She looked every inch the poised social idiot, but Jordan saw through it. He'd spent the week calming Leila's nightmares. Every sudden noise made her flinch. Every change in light brought a flicker of fear to her eyes. The doctors called it post-trauma sensitivity, but Jordan saw more. Her isolation, her distrust, the burden she hadn't chosen. He could protect her body, but not her mind. And that truth haunted him more than any enemy. Now, what a beautiful evening, she said without turning. Almost makes you believe the world is kind. Cut the poetry, Jordan said, keeping a measured distance. Why are you here? She turned, lips curling. To congratulate you, the man who almost married me and now orchestrates a gala in honor of the wife he claims to have loved touching. Well, he didn't blink. You're not going to talk your way out of what you did. I don't need to talk. I need you to understand something, she said softly. They'll never let you keep her. Jordan's jaw tightened. I mean, look at you. She continued, trying so hard to play the hero, but deep down, you were just the next mark, a signature on a paper. And Leila, she was always the asset. His voice dropped. She's a child. She's a weapon. Ilsa snapped, and for the first time, the mask cracked. Her mind, her lineage, her immunity to a genetic neurotoxin. They bred her for something, Jordan. You were just the cover story. He stepped forward close now. So you admit it. She smiled again. I admit nothing, but I will give you one last chance. Turn her over, disappear. You'll be paid more than you can imagine. You'll even get a clean reputation. The press will adore you. Ilsa leaned in. You're going to regret this. Jordan held her gaze. Not tonight. Tonight, I came prepared. With a subtle gesture. Two agents stepped out of the shadows. Ilsa's eyes widened slightly, not in fear, but in recognition. Well played, she said, but I didn't come alone either. She reached into her handbag. Jordan tensed, motioning to his men, but instead of a gun, she pulled out a remote. She pressed a button. The lights flickered inside the ballroom for a moment. Music faltered, then screams rang out. Jordan turned and ran inside the ballroom. A thick haze had filled the air. It wasn't smoke. It was something else. Chemical, translucent, odorless. People stumbled, gasped, clutching their throats, or collapsing. Panic surged. Some rushed the exits, only to find them sealed. Shut. Security, scrambled. Emergency protocols activated, but it was already too late for some. Jordan pulled out his encrypted radio seal. All hatchback vents, get fresh air in here now, no casualties. Do you hear me? He turned to Ilsa, who remained by the garden arch, completely calm. You poisoned them, he shouted. She tilted her head. It's not poison, it's persuasion, a neuroagent, temporary paralysis and mild memory disruption, designed to make people forget just the parts. Why? She smiled, because this wasn't about Leila, not tonight. It was about the board, the real owners. The ones who needed to forget what your foundation uncovered last quarter. Jordan stared at her, horrified. She continued, her voice almost soft. You were digging too close. Jordan, trafficking routes disguised as medical shipments, defense contractors funding private labs overseas. You connected the dots, and they were watching. You knew, he whispered. I didn't just know, she said, stepping back into the shadows. I'm the one who gave them your files. She vanished into the night. Jordan stood frozen. The ballroom behind him echoed with cries and sirens, but his mind raced elsewhere. Leila. If they had pulled this off in the city, what were they planning? Upstate, an hour later, Jordan's jet roared down a private runway headed north. On board, Agent Fields met him with grim news. The cabin's empty. Jordan's eyes narrowed. What agents were found unconscious? No sign of forced entry, no alarms. Leila's gone. Jordan's knuckles turned white as he gripped the seat. She knew this would happen. He muttered, she was never after me. She wanted Leila back. Fields leaned forward. Then we get her back. Jordan nodded, once cold fire in his eyes, and we burn everything in our way. Deep in the Vermont woods, Leila awoke inside a black SUV. Her hands were tied. A masked man sat beside her, silent, arms folded. The vehicle bounced along a dirt road, heading somewhere remote. Across from her sat Ilsa. Leila's lip quivered, but she didn't speak. Ilsa reached into her purse and pulled out a small necklace. It was Leila's. She'd lost 2 years ago in the park. I kept it. Ilsa said, you were always mine. Leila glared at her. You lied to me. I protected you. You tried to poison Daddy. Ilsa paused. No, sweet girl. I tried to save him. From himself. Leila turned away, tears burning in her eyes. He's not perfect, but he's kind and he listens. Ilsa's face darkened. That's weakness. No, Leila said, raising her chin. That's what makes him strong. Ilsa stared at her, eyes unreadable. You've changed, she whispered. You're not the little shadow I raised. Leila said nothing. Ilsa leaned back. We'll see how long that spirit lasts, where we're going. And outside, the trees grew taller, darker, as if the forest itself knew justice was on the hunt, and Jordan Blake was coming. The wind howled through the thick canopy of pine as the SUV carved its path deeper into the Vermont wilderness. The unpaved road trembled beneath the heavy wheels inside the vehicle. Leila sat upright, wrists bound but eyes unflinching. Her young face was strewn with dried tears, but her spirit remained unbroken. She'd stopped crying hours ago. Now her silence was sharper than any scream across from her. Ilsa sat in eerie composure. Legs crossed, leather gloves resting on her lap. Her eyes flicked, occasionally toward Leila, but revealed nothing, only calculation. The driver said nothing he didn't need to. The silence inside the vehicle was thick with unfinished intent. The necklace Ilsa had shown Leila, one she'd claimed to have kept still, lay on the center seat between them. Leila stared at it, but not with longing. It was a relic, now like everything from her life. Before the engagement, before the betrayal, Ilsa finally broke the silence. "You should try to rest where we're going. You'll need your strength." Leila didn't answer. "You're not a prisoner," Ilsa continued. "You're the key. You've always been the key. You just don't understand it. Yet my dad will find me." Leila said, her voice calm but edged. Ilsa smirked. "Your father is clever, but not clever enough. By the time he finds where we're going, it'll be too late. The work will have already begun." "What work?" "Work that will change everything. Your immunity is only the beginning. You're proof that it's possible to manipulate selective neurogenetics without ethical barriers. They wanted to destroy the research, bury the truth, but I protected it. I protected you. You poisoned him." Leila said, her voice rising slightly. "I prevented." "A mistake," Ilsa replied coldly. "You think he would have survived with the truth, that the board wouldn't have cut him out, discredited him? I offered him a way out. You ruined it." "No," Leila whispered. "You did." Ilsa didn't reply this time. She turned her gaze to the window as the SUV turned onto a narrower road. Barely more than a trail, pines pressed closer. The light dimmed under their ancient branches in the front seat. The driver finally spoke. 10 minutes. 200 meters south, Jordan stood in the operations hub of a temporary command post, erected on the edge of a lake house resort. His face was stone, his voice a blade. "Where's the satellite feed?" he asked. Agent Fields, blue-eyed but focused, tapped into the touchscreen. "We have a drone thermal tracking put a vehicle leaving the secondary cabin at 2:43. Emmett took a northern route to public roads. We lost it near Mount Patterson, but infrared shows tire tracks heading deeper into private forest land." Jordan leaned in. "Owned by Shell Company, untraceable. But the land was once part of a military research facility decommissioned and sold 20 years ago." Jordan nodded. "Get me a chopper." Already warming up, as Jordan turned to leave, Agent Fields called out. "Jordan, she's smart, but you know Ilsa. She doesn't act without layers. You walk in unprepared, she'll twist everything." "I'm not walking in," Jordan said, slipping a tablet into his inner coat pocket. "I'm bringing hell with me." The facility sat like a ghost in the heart of the wood-steel bones under moss, concrete halls swallowed. By time the main structure, shaped like an L, had only one illuminated wing. A single landing pad stretched beside it, covered in tarps and overgrowth. The SUV slowed to a halt. Ilsa stepped out first, brushing leaves from her coat. 2 armed guards emerged from the trees and moved to open the back door. Leila stepped down. Slowly, her legs were stiff, her wrists still bound, but her eyes were defiant. They were led into the main corridor walls, covered in rust, stained medical tiles, overhead lights flickering. The deeper they went, the more modern the interior became. Old bones, new tech. Leila's stomach churned. They entered a clean room. The air was frigid. Purified monitors lined the walls. A woman in a lab coat greeted them. "This is Dr. Laurent," Ilsa said. "She's been waiting to meet you." Dr. Laurent bent down to Leila's eye level. Her tone was oddly kind. "You're very brave, Leila. What we're about to do? It'll help a lot of people. You're special. The kind of special that saves lives." Leila didn't blink. "I'm not here to save anyone for you," Ilsa laughed. "Oh, Leila, still clinging to your father's fantasies. Don't worry, this won't hurt much." Dr. Laurent turned to the monitor. A file labeled Leila Sequence Protocol appeared below it. A string of genome maps, reaction indexes, and dosage tables. Ilsa looked at Leila. "We're going to take a small blood sample." That's all. Leila's eyes scanned the room, her fingers curled and uncurled. "Get on the chair," the guard barked. But before Leila moved, the building shuddered. A low tremor rolled through the walls. A thump, then another, then a siren screamed to life. Unauthorized aircraft landing. A voice shouted from the overhead speakers. Ilsa spun toward the hallway. "No," she hissed. Dr. Laurent's eyes widened. "They found us a crash." The sound of boots' gunfire echoed through the corridor. Leila stared at the door as it burst open. Jordan stepped through, flanked by 2 armed agents. His tuxedo was torn, dirt on his cuffs. "Fury in?" His eyes step away from her, he growled. Ilsa reached for something in her coat. Jordan raised his hand. Don't, she paused. You came alone, she sneered. No, he said, I brought every whisper you ever tried to bury. He tossed the tablet onto the floor. It blinked to life, projecting files, evidence, security footage, and one voice, recording Ilse von the 7th of June. If the girl screams, don't stop, we need the sample. Her father's opinion is irrelevant. Now the lab fell silent. Dr. Laurent stepped back. Jordan's men stormed in, securing the guards. Ilse was disarmed and restrained. Leila ran to Jordan. He dropped to his knees and held her tightly. I knew you'd come, she whispered. I'll always come, he said hours later. The facility was under federal lockdown. Ilse was in custody. Dr. Laurent had agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. The files Jordan recovered were enough to launch a congressional investigation. But more than that, Leila was safe back at the lake house, wrapped in a wool blanket beside a crackling fireplace. She looked up at Jordan. Will they come again? She asked. He didn't lie, maybe, but next time we won't be alone. She nodded. I don't want to be special anymore. I just want to be normal. Jordan touched her cheek. You're not normal, Leila. You're better. Because even when you were scared, you told the truth. You saved me. You saved everyone in that ballroom. She looked down, but I couldn't save Mom. He paused, then said gently, your mother would have been proud. And wherever she is, she's watching. You grow into something strong. Leila nodded slowly, and for the first time since the wedding that never was, she let herself rest outside. The snow had started to fall. Quiet, pure, the kind of snow that muffled the past and made room for something new. Justice at last had found its way through the trees. The following morning, the first light of dawn crept in through the cabin's wooden blinds. Leila lay curled on the couch, a thick knitted blanket wrapped around her small frame. Her breathing was steady but not deep. She wasn't asleep. Not fully. There was a particular kind of wakefulness that came after terror, a state where the mind refused to rest even when the body begged for it. Jordan stood in the kitchen watching the coffee percolate. His tuxedo from the aborted wedding was long gone, replaced with a simple flannel shirt and worn jeans, but his posture remained sharp, controlled. He hadn't slept either. Across the room, Agent Fields was reviewing the forensics report that had just come in from Quantico. His glasses slid down his nose as he read, face grim. She was planning this for years, Fields muttered. Ilse had offshore labs, former military assets, encrypted cloud databases under pseudonyms. She built a damn empire out of stolen research and buried ethics. Jordan didn't answer. He poured a mug of coffee and set it gently on the table beside Leila, not disturbing her, but her eyes blinked open anyway. Good morning, she whispered. He crouched beside her. Morning, brave girl. You sleep at all? Little, she said, pulling the blanket tighter. It was quiet. That's a start, he said, offering a faint smile. I made breakfast. There's fruit toast, no science experiments. I promise. She let out a tired chuckle. We safe here for now, Jordan replied, but there's more. We need to talk about when you're ready. Leila sat up, slowly brushing hair from her face. Her eyes had dark circles, but they were focused. I want to know everything, Jordan nodded. He turned to Fields. Let's begin. An hour later. The living room had transformed into a war room. Papers, photos, and maps were spread across the floor and coffee table. Leila sat between them, listening intently. Jordan pointed to a document showing a chart titled Genetic Phase Transfer. Subject, Leila. You remember when your mom used to take you to that pediatric research clinic in Chicago? Jordan asked gently. Leila nodded. She said it was just to check my immune system. It wasn't a lie, Jordan said, but it wasn't the full truth. Either your mom was working with a private team, back then, one that focused on inherited immunity and gene anomalies. They discovered your DNA had a rare pattern, something no one had seen before, something Ilse wanted, Leila whispered. Jordan continued. She used your mother's trust, and later she used me. I didn't know not. Then I believed she loved me, that she wanted to help you, but when your mother died, Ilse made sure the research was never published. She buried. It claimed you were unstable, too fragile to go through more trials, but what she really wanted was control. Agent Fields added, with your blood. Ilse believed she could create immunity-based treatments that governments would kill for. Imagine a world where soldiers never got sick, where viruses had no effect. If you control that, you control the future. Leila stared at the photos of the old lab. The wires, the cold steel, the silent machines humming in the dark. But why poison him at the wedding? Why? Now because Jordan said she knew I was getting too close, that I'd found files she thought I deleted years ago. She wanted to silence me before I made them public. The wedding was just a front. It was always her exit plan. Leila's hand clenched the edge of the blanket, and she would have. Let me die too, Jordan swallowed. She didn't see you as a child anymore. Only data. There was a long silence. Then Leila asked, so what do we do now? Fields and Jordan exchanged a look. Then Jordan said we go public by evening. The sun dipped low over Lake Champlain. The makeshift cabin felt smaller. Now, as tension built again like a storm waiting offshore, Jordan sat in front of a microphone, his voice steady but raw, recording the message that would shake corridors. Far beyond the woods to the American people, he began. I am Jordan West. For years, I believed in a vision of medicine that could change the world, but in the wrong hands, that vision became a weapon. I was deceived and nearly destroyed, but my daughter saved me, and now I owe her and all of you the truth. He laid out the evidence, the gene manipulation trials, the unregistered experiments, the attempted murder, the files Ilsa had hidden. Meanwhile, Leila helped Agent Fields upload the data packet to a secured press portal. She watched the progress bar climb toward 100%. You're not scared, Fields asked her. Leila nodded. I am, but scared people still have to do the right thing. The audio broadcast went live on every major outlet. Just after 7:00 p.m., within hours, the story dominated headlines. Billionaire exposes genetic exploitation. Scandal, read one girl who stopped the wedding, uncovers medical crime, ring, said another. But amidst the media storm, Leila received something unexpected, a letter. It was handwritten, folded neatly inside a plain white envelope. She opened it on the porch beneath the stars. The porch light flickering softly, Jordan watched from inside but didn't intrude. The letter was from Ilsa. It read, Leila, you think you've won, but the truth is more complicated than what you believe. I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted to preserve the legacy your mother and I started. One day when the world understands what we tried to do, they'll thank us. Until then, you'll always wonder what if you had. Let me finish what I started. You carry more than you know. Leila folded the letter without flinching. She still thinks she's right. Jordan joined her on the porch. She always did. Leila looked up. Do you think she was ever really in love with you? Jordan sighed. I think she was in love with what I represented, a shortcut to legitimacy, a way to stay close to the asset. Leila said quietly. You, he said, touching her hand, but I'm done letting people define you that way. From now on, you're not the subject of anyone's experiment. You're just Leila. She smiled faintly. Just Leila sounds kind of amazing. The next day, Jordan and Leila walked along the lake shore as mist lifted from the water. Ducks glided past, a dog barked somewhere in the distance. Everything felt possible again. You know, this doesn't end here, Jordan said. There'll be hearings, investigations, maybe even people who want to challenge what we exposed. I know, Leila said, but this time I won't be scared to speak. He looked at her, truly looked, not as a protector, not as a broken man, but as a father, one who had almost lost everything and had somehow gained more. She tried to erase your mother's work, Jordan said, but you carried it forward with your heart. She gave me that. Leila said, Mom always said the truth never needs to scream, it just waits. They paused, the wind picked up. Then Leila added, but sometimes it needs to yell, really loud in a wedding hall. Jordan laughed. It wasn't over, they knew that, but the shadows had lifted, at least for now, and as father and daughter stood side by side watching the sunrise shimmer across the lake, it wasn't fear that filled their hearts anymore. It was fire and faith and the promise that no secret would stay buried forever. It began with a click, barely audible, yet a muse in the quiet hallway of the hotel. Sweet Leila looked up from her notebook as Jordan hung up a call with the Department of Justice. His face was unreadable, but his eyes carried the weight of what he had just heard. They're launching a formal inquiry. He said the Attorney General wants to fast-track a federal investigation. Natalia's going to be indicted. Leila let out a long, slow breath, finally, but Jordan didn't respond right away. He crossed the room and turned on the television. The screen flickered to a breaking news alert. A reporter stood in front of a burning biotech lab just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, confirmed arson. This lab, believed to be linked to off their Ord pharmaceutical trials, was set ablaze late. Last night, several documents have been destroyed, including Jordan muted. The television that was one of Natalia's backup facilities, they're scrubbing evidence. Leila whispered. Fast, he said grimly, faster than we expected. Agent Fields, who had flown back into town that morning, entered the suite just then, holding a file thick with printed emails and bank transfers. Natalia's network is larger than we thought. Offshore accounts, shell companies in Bice, the Caymans, and one we're still tracking through Switzerland. Does she know we're still moving forward? Leila asked. Fields nodded. She knows, and she's not running. She's circling the wagons, trying to control the fallout. Leila stood up. So what now? Do we just wait? No, Jordan, said his voice, quiet but firm. Now we push harder. That afternoon, Leila and Jordan were escorted to a closed door, or congressional hearing in D.C. The air inside the chamber was tense, and the room was filled with suited officials, legal observers, and a few high-ranking federal officers. Cameras were not allowed, but the eyes that bore down on them were just as invasive. Jordan sat straight, hands clasped, while Leila remained calm but alert at his side, across from them. A long wooden desk seated a panel of senators, some curious, others skeptical, and a few visibly irritated. Senator Gracie, a silver-haired figure with sharp eyes and a tone that could slice steel, leaned forward. Mr. Harper, your testimony asserts that your former fiancé attempted to poison you and manipulate classified biomedical data for personal gain, and this accusation hinges in large part on the testimony of a child. Your daughter? Jordan's jaw tightened. With respect, Senator, my daughter is not just a child. She's the victim of one of the most calculated acts of medical exploitation in this country's history, and her warning saved my life. Gracie blinked, and the proof. Leila slid a folder across the table before Jordan could speak. This contains timestamps, genetic tracking files, and recorded conversations from Natalia's encrypted server. We recovered them through a private forensic team. 2 weeks ago, the senator took the folder but didn't open it right away. Miss Harper, she said slowly, I hope you understand the gravity of what you've set into motion. I do, Leila said clearly, but what Natalia did to other children should never happen again. That's what matters. The room fell. Silent. One of the younger senators, Senator Morales, finally reached for the folder and began leafing through it. He raised his brows, visibly disturbed. This is not conjecture. Ha, he murmured. This is a playbook for biological warfare that changed the room. Rapid scribbling started from aides' papers, shuffled phones vibrated discreetly, and in that moment the tide began to turn. Later that night, back in the hotel, Leila sat by the window with a cup of cocoa, staring at the Capitol building glowing in the distance. The city felt heavy, like it carried the weight of 1,000 untold truths. Jordan stepped in from the adjoining room. You were amazing today, he said. She didn't smile. I didn't feel amazing. I felt small, like I was screaming into a cave. He sat beside her. But you were heard. Leila finally looked at him. Do you ever feel like we're too late? That maybe some people already got hurt because we didn't stop this sooner? Jordan reached for her hand. Yes, I feel that every day, but if we carry that guilt forever, we'll never be able to do anything right. We do what we can now, and we make it count. Just then a knock on the hotel door interrupted the quiet. Jordan answered, expecting Fields, but instead a young woman stood there. African-American, early 30s, dressed in a crisp military uniform. Her name tag read Lieutenant Carmen Holloway. Mr. Harper, I'm with the Army's Ethics Review Board. She said, her tone respectful. I've been instructed to personally thank you and your daughter. Leila stepped forward, confused. Lieutenant Holloway continued. My sister was one of Natalia's early test subjects. We thought she died from complications in a flu trial. Turns out, the entire project was falsified. Your testimony reopened her case. Leila's mouth parted. I didn't know there were others. There are, Holloway said softly. And now, thanks to you, they're going to be seen. She handed Leila a small black envelope. Inside was a folded piece of stationery and a patch. The patch was a golden olive branch encircling the words valor through truth, honor. Badge. Holloway said unofficial, but earned. Leila held it in her palm for the first time. Since that horrible day at the wedding, tears welled in her eyes. Not from fear, but from recognition. But just as one door opened, another threatened to slam shut. The next morning, Jordan's phone buzzed with a coded message. She's moving Zurich. The account's draining. Natalia was escaping. Fields met them in the lobby. 20 minutes later, private jet filed under a shell corporation just took off from Geneva. She's gone off radar. But our contacts in Interpol are watching. She's not slipping away forever. But she's still ahead of us. Jordan muttered, always one step. Maybe not anymore. Leila said suddenly. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a flash drive. I didn't tell you everything I found, she said quietly. There's one last folder hidden inside the video file. Mom used to hide her journal entries. The same way embedding data in static frames. Jordan took the drive, surprised Fields plugged it into his laptop and ran a deep decrypt. After several minutes, a file popped up with a blinking red icon. Valkyrie 9, transfer protocols. Fields leaned in. Oh my God, this isn't just about gene trials. It's a trade list. They were planning to sell this to defense contractors. Leila stared at the screen. That's why she didn't run. She was waiting for the deal to close. Jordan's voice dropped. We have to stop it now. Fields nodded, already dialing. I'll alert Homeland. We need to move. Fast. This goes above national crime. It's a matter of security. And just like that, the narrative shifted again from the tragedy of one girl's blood to a silent war between truth and power as Leila stood beside her father watching as the world turned toward chaos. Again, she whispered, Dad, this doesn't end, does it? He looked down at her, his eyes fierce but kind. Number, but neither do we. And in the distance, the sky began to darken, not with fear but with purpose. Because this time they weren't alone. The truth had started to echo, and its voice was getting louder. It was nearly midnight when the plane touched down. At Andrews Air Force Base, the sky above washed in a heavy blue-black, the kind that seemed to press down on everything beneath. Leila sat quietly beside her father in the back of the unmarked SUV as it sped through the empty highway, escorted front and rear by government vehicles. The flash drive she had given them, the one with the Valkyrie 9 files, was no longer just evidence. It was a detonator. Natalia's plan wasn't just about controlling biomedical data or manipulating her way into marriage and wealth. She had been selling access to cutting-edge DNA, weaponization, sequencing, specific pathogens, quiet assassins disguised as cures, and now someone out there was trying to buy it, and someone else was trying to stop it. Where are we going? Leila asked. Finally, her voice soft in the dark, Jordan leaned forward to speak with the agent driving the safe house outside Arlington. The federal task force will coordinate from there until the international team locks the buyer's location. Leila looked out the window. Do you think it'll work? Jordan didn't answer right away. He reached out and took her hand. We're going to try. The safe house was not what Leila expected. It looked like an old farmhouse, tucked behind pine trees with peeling shutters and a porch swing that creaked in the wind inside. However, it was a fortress. Armored doors, surveillance, screens, encrypted radios, humming softly in the background. Leila was shown to a small upstairs room with a quilted bedspread and a window overlooking the woods. There, for the first time in days, she fell asleep. But her dreams were uneasy. She dreamt of her mother standing beneath a rain-streaked glass dome holding out a handkerchief. Don't let them take it, she said, her voice echoing. Don't let them silence what's already speaking. When Leila awoke, her palms were sweating. The sun hadn't risen yet. Downstairs, Jordan and Agent Fields were already up, faces drawn tight with fatigue. Coffee steamed on the table. Beside an open laptop showing live drone feeds over Zurich. A red dot blinked over a private hangar. They've got the plane. Fields said Natalia's buyer was set to meet her there tonight, but she hasn't shown. She's playing the clock, Jordan muttered. Waiting for us to blink. Fields tapped a key and brought up a second feed. That's where we pull the plug. He turned the screen toward Leila. A building appeared cold and industrial, with a sprawl of shipping containers and armed guards outside. That's the delivery site. Her fallback option: we intercepted chatter this morning. She's planning to move the data physically. No more online transfers. Leila narrowed her eyes. So if we stop the truck, we stop everything. By noon. The team had mobilized 2 black vans, 3 plain sedans, and an aerial drone tracked the route from the warehouse inside one of the vans. Leila sat beside a young analyst named Roy. He was fresh-faced, maybe 25, but his fingers danced over the tablet. Like a concert pianist, 2 minutes to intercept, he said the convoy just passed. Route 56 Jordan was in the lead car with Fields and a tactical team through her earpiece. Leila could hear the calm, clipped orders being issued. Approach on my signal. Box formation, disable the lead engine. We want them alive. The moment came fast, on the narrow country road just past a bend. The convoy emerged, 3 cargo vans and a sleek black Range Rover. Agent Kwabena gave the signal. In an instant, the pursuit vehicles surged ahead, tires screeching, smoke curling from the back wheels of the SUV as it tried to veer off course. But Frederick's car had already cut it off. The tactical team quickly surrounded the trucks, armed agents storming the cabs and pulling out the drivers. Within 90 seconds, it was over. Young analyst Daniel let out a low whistle. That was clean. But Abena didn't smile. She knew this wasn't the end, and she was right. Inside the final truck, locked in a reinforced titanium container, wasn't just a backup of the Omega Project data. There were blood samples too, dozens, meticulously labeled, cataloged, and cooled. Kwabena examined them with a grim stare. This is her leverage. If the digital files are lost, these samples are her real trade. You can't patent life, he added, but you can traffic it. Abena couldn't stop looking at the vials. One bore her name. She reached for it, her fingers trembling, holding it up to the overhead light. Her blood, her history, her body, reduced to product. She didn't cry, not yet. Instead, she looked at Kwabena. Can we destroy them? We have to log them first. He replied, chain of evidence. But after that, yes, then do it, she said. That night, Ilsa reappeared, not in Geneva, not in hiding, but on every major broadcast network. A pre-recorded message aired simultaneously across global media. She was poised, pristine, flawless hair, measured tone, dressed in a white blazer, her expression the same calculated calm that haunted Abena's memory. To the citizens of Ghana and beyond, she began, I know there are whispers surrounding my work, accusations, distortions, betrayal. Let me be very clear. My mission has always been to uplift humanity. Some call it ambition. I call it responsibility. But progress terrifies some, especially when it's led by a woman, relentless, disruptive, unapologetic. Frederick hurled the remote. It shattered against the safe house wall. Abena didn't flinch. Ilsa's voice chilled further. If I am hunted, if I am convicted, understand this. My knowledge does not die with me. Others possess it now. What you fear will become what you depend upon. That is the future. The screen flickered black. No one spoke. Then Abena rose and walked to the window, gazing at the still fields beyond. She's not hiding, Abena said. She's warning us. She believes we'll need her one day. Frederick stepped behind her. Then we make sure that day never comes. How? She whispered. He looked at her reflection in the glass. We make the truth louder than her threats. The next morning, Abena asked to go somewhere. They drove out to a quiet chapel near her old school, where her mother's ashes had been scattered 5 years earlier. A simple memorial stone sat under a willow tree, barely visible from the road. Abena knelt down and placed a small note there. Folded paper, a child's handwriting still scribbled beneath the newer script. She whispered something that only the wind heard. Frederick waited at a respectful distance, hands in his pockets, eyes cast down. After a while, Abena walked back and stood beside him. I'm ready. For what? To tell my story. All of it. He looked at her. Are you sure? She nodded. She used silence like a weapon. I won't. 3 days later, Abena sat under studio lights, a microphone clipped to her collar, across from a radio host known for her unflinching interviews. The walls were lined with acoustic foam, but the words they spoke would travel far beyond them. And your name? The host asked gently. Abena Vance, she replied, her voice steady. And why are you here? Abena took a breath, and then slowly she began. I was 6 when I was first given something. I didn't understand. A vitamin, they said. A special one. I was 8 when I stopped feeling my hands in the morning. 9 when I started asking questions. Her voice, quiet but firm, echoed through the airwaves and across the country. People listened in church parking lots, on kitchen radios, in long-haul trucks. The story had begun with a whisper in a wedding hall. Now it was a roar. And Abena, a little girl who once cried out for someone to believe her, had become the voice that would not be silenced, not anymore. The following week brought no calm. Abena's voice, broadcast to millions, had ignited a firestorm. Talk shows dissected her words. News panels argued over the ethics. Anonymous sources came forward with more stories. Lab technicians, former patients, even quiet voices from inside Valkyrie's outer rings. The name Natalia Hart had become synonymous with betrayal. But for Abena, none of that felt like victory, because Natalia was still out there. Frederick watched the media frenzy unfold with guarded distance. He had learned long ago that public outrage burned fast and died faster. What they needed wasn't just noise. They needed action, accountability, a lasting reckoning. That morning, as sunlight poured across the Georgetown safe house, Frederick walked into the kitchen with a phone pressed to his ear. "She's resurfaced," he said grimly. Abena looked up from her notebook. "Where?" "Greece. Offshore. A research vessel registered to one of her shell companies. Satellite picked up a woman matching her profile boarding a helicopter last night." Abena stood. "Then why are we still here?" "Because the government can't move fast enough. Not without creating international tension." Frederick paused. "But we can." Abena's eyes narrowed. "You mean privately?" Frederick nodded. "I've already reached out to an old friend in naval intelligence. He owes me 3 days. 3 days later, they were airborne again, this time on a quiet private jet, headed toward the Ionian Sea. With them were Fields, Roy, and a quiet, broad-shouldered man named Taurus, a former SEAL who now operated quietly in civilian shadow work. The flight was silent, the kind of silence that pulsed with intent. Abena sat beside the window, fingers curled in her lap. She had grown since the night she stopped a wedding with nothing more than a scream, but inside, part of her still trembled. Natalia's world was no longer abstract. It wasn't science fiction. It was real, cruel, and hidden behind polished smiles and clean labs, and Abena was walking directly into its heart. When they landed in Kefalonia, the air smelled of salt and olives. A black jeep met them at the airstrip, driven by a local operative Taurus trusted. They didn't speak much as the sun dipped below the horizon. They reached the coast. The vessel sat like a shadow on the water, a sleek, modern research yacht retrofitted for privacy and control. The windows were tinted black. 2 armed guards lingered at the gangway. From the brush, Fields whispered, "We're not going in loud. We use Abena." "What?" Frederick turned sharply. "She's the one Natalia wants to control," Fields said. "Her face will lower defenses, buy us time to get inside." Frederick hesitated. "It's too dangerous." But Abena was already unzipping her jacket. "She tried to silence me once," she said quietly. "Let's see if she dares try again." The guards weren't expecting a child. When Abena stepped into the clearing, her hair braided, her face calm, they didn't raise their weapons. One stepped forward, puzzled. "Where did you come from?" "I'm here for Dr. Hart," Abena said evenly. "She knows who I am." The man hesitated, then radioed something in Greek. Moments later, a voice crackled back. He nodded once and motioned Abena forward. Frederick clenched his fists from the shadows but didn't move. She was inside now, and the clock was ticking. The corridor smelled of antiseptic and engine oil. Abena followed the first guard through a narrow metal hallway. Her footsteps echoed too loudly in her ears. Every breath was deliberate. Then she saw her. Natalia stood at the far end of a wide lab, dressed in white once more, though now with a touch more fatigue around her eyes. She turned slowly when the door opened. "Abena," she said, as if surprised. "You came." "You expected me," Abena said coldly. Natalia smiled faintly. "I hoped. You've always been braver than you know." "I'm not here for compliments. I'm here for justice," Abena said. Natalia tilted her head. "Is that what you think this is? A courtroom? You don't understand. They never let women like me build empires unless we bleed first." "You bled others," Abena snapped. "You used me." "I saved you," Natalia said. "Don't rewrite the past. You were dying. I gave you something no one else dared. You lived." Abena's voice lowered. "At what cost?" Natalia took a slow step forward. "Abena, I have work that needs finishing. You've already become the symbol. Let me give you the substance. The world will follow you." "I'm not here to lead your cult." Natalia's smile faded. Just then, the lights flickered. Footsteps pounded down the hallway. Natalia turned as Frederick and Taurus burst through the door, weapons raised. Natalia lifted both hands slowly. "Too late," she said. Fields burst into the control room, slamming his hand on the console. "Shut it down." A technician tried to run, Taurus tackled him and handcuffed him in one motion. Abena stepped into the room behind them, eyes scanning the monitors. The yacht had begun transmitting a final data package to an offshore server, an archive of the Valkyrie research including names, locations, and experimental notes. The kind of leak that would unleash chaos if sold to the wrong hands. "It's uploading to a private server in Iceland," Roy said, scanning the codes. "We've got 90 seconds. "Kill the power," Frederick ordered. Roy hesitated. "That'll wipe everything." Abena stepped forward. "Do it." The cabin went black. The engine died. The lights, the fans, the very hum of electricity vanished. For a moment the world was silent, utterly, unnaturally still. Then emergency lights blinked on. Natalia stood in the center of the lab, hands still raised, no longer smiling. "You'll regret this," she said. Frederick approached her, cuffs in hand. "I already do." She didn't resist. That night, as they sailed the yacht back to port under escort, Abena sat on the top deck alone. She looked out over the waves, the stars above sharp and unblinking. Frederick joined her, handing her a blanket. "You did it," he said. "No," she replied. "We did." He sat beside her. "Natalia's going to prison, and her research will be buried. But not forgotten," Abena said. "We can't forget. That's how it starts again." Frederick nodded slowly. "Then what do we do?" She looked at him, her eyes unwavering. "We build something better." 2 months later, Abena stood in front of a congressional committee. She was 15 now, composed, strong. "I stand here not because I want revenge," she said clearly, "but because I want truth to matter again. I want people to listen when a child says something is wrong. I want science to serve people, not power." The room fell silent. Then the chairman spoke, voice gravelly. "Miss Adoma, what would you like this committee to do?" Abena took a breath. "Create a registry, protect experimental data, fund medical ethics panels, but most of all, listen." She stepped back, and the room erupted in applause. Later that week, Abena returned to the quiet chapel beneath the willow tree. She stood alone this time, the wind brushing her cheek, a note in her hand. She knelt and placed it beside the stone again. This time the handwriting was stronger. "Mom, I did it." And the wind carried her whisper far beyond the trees. The echoes of Abena's words before Congress still rang in Frederick's mind as he stood outside the courthouse, watching the crowd gathering behind metal barricades. Reporters jostled for space, their breath visible in the cool morning air. Headlines had already declared the upcoming trial of Natalia Hart as the medical ethics case of the decade. Inside the holding van parked discreetly to the side, Natalia sat poised. Her hands were cuffed in front of her, chin lifted, as if she were about to walk into a symposium rather than a federal courtroom. Even stripped of her designer wardrobe and dressed only in a plain gray suit, there was still something chillingly composed about her, like a queen awaiting trial by fire. Frederick turned away before the marshals led her inside. He didn't want to give her the satisfaction of another look. Abena sat quietly in the witness room, her legs swinging slightly off the edge of the chair. She was dressed in navy blue, her curls tied back, and her eyes scanning the statement she had written, rewritten, and rewritten again. Outside the frosted glass door, footsteps passed back and forth, but in her mind it was silent. Only her mother's voice echoed, "You speak when it matters, baby, not before and not after." Frederick knocked gently and stepped inside. "They're ready when you are." She looked up. "Are you?" He gave a faint smile. "I've never been more nervous." Abena tucked the paper away and stood. "Good. Means we're still human." In the courtroom, the air was thick with attention. Every seat was filled. Lawyers shifted in expensive suits, and journalists scribbled notes feverishly. A panel of 12 jurors sat stone-faced under the fluorescent lights, the weight of history suddenly draped across their shoulders. Natalia sat at the defense table, flanked by 3 attorneys. She glanced briefly toward Abena as she entered, but said nothing. No smirk, no recognition, just cold calculation. Abena walked steadily to the stand, her small form somehow filling the room with gravity. The prosecutor approached gently. "Miss Adoma, can you tell us in your own words what happened on the day of your father's wedding?" And Abena began. She told them everything, not just about the handkerchief, but the months before. The subtle pain, the secrecy, the moments when she questioned her own instincts. How Natalia had made her feel small in her own body and powerful only when it suited the woman's ambitions. She gave me medicine I never agreed to, Abena said, her voice clear. She told my father it was for my condition, but it wasn't. It was for her research. I wasn't a daughter to her. I was a test subject. Gasps fluttered through the gallery. Natalia's lawyer objected. Speculation. But the judge raised a hand. Overruled. Continue, Miss Adoma. And she did. She spoke for nearly an hour, and not once did her voice tremble. After the court recessed for lunch, Abena stepped into the hallway, shoulders drawn tight. Proud of you, Frederick said, handing her a bottle of water. I hated every second, she admitted, but I meant all of it. He nodded. That's why it mattered. A woman approached from across the hall with silvering hair and deep-set eyes behind thick glasses. She held out a hand. My name's Margaret Clean. I was a nurse in Valkyrie's Atlanta facility, she said softly. Back in the early days. I didn't speak up. I should have. But after today, she swallowed, you made me remember why I got into medicine in the first place. Abena looked at her for a moment, then reached out and hugged her. The defense tried to spin a different tale. They painted Natalia as a misunderstood genius, a pioneer working outside broken systems, a woman willing to sacrifice comfort for innovation. They implied that Abena had misinterpreted, perhaps been manipulated by overprotective influences. But public sentiment had already turned. The story had outgrown the courtroom. Still, Natalia remained composed through it all, never breaking, never blinking, until Fields took the stand. He'd spent the last weeks combing through deleted archives, whistleblower emails, and encrypted files. And when he began presenting internal memos, coded trial logs, and private voice messages between Natalia and her financiers, discussing dosage tolerances and liability avoidance, the courtroom changed. Even Natalia's lawyers looked shaken. Fields ended his testimony with a sentence that silenced the room. Genius doesn't excuse the use of children as guinea pigs. Not in America, not ever. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for 9 hours. 9 hours of waiting, pacing, praying. Abena and Frederick stayed in a quiet chamber, watching the clock hands circle until their eyes blurred. Neither spoke much. What was left to say? Finally, the bailiff knocked. They've reached a verdict. Abena gripped Frederick's hand as they stepped back into the room. The hum of anticipation made her chest feel like it was full of bees. The foreman stood. On the count of medical malpractice resulting in harm, we find the defendant, Dr. Natalia Hart, guilty. Gasps echoed. Somewhere in the gallery, a cry. A reporter's pen clattered to the floor. The judge didn't waste time. Sentencing would follow, but the message was already clear. Natalia Hart would not walk free again. As she was led away in handcuffs for the first time, her expression faltered. Her eyes met Abena's, not with anger, but with something that almost resembled fear or loss. Abena stared back. Not triumphant, but steady. This wasn't about revenge. It was about remembering. The weeks after the trial were quiet, too quiet. Frederick filled the silence with repairs around the house, long walks, but every time he passed Abena's door, he paused. She wasn't the same girl he'd first taken in. She couldn't be. One evening, she approached him holding an envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "My application," she said. "To what?" "The National Youth Bioethics Forum," she replied with a faint smile. "They meet in D.C. every year. I want to help write the guidelines for medical trials involving minors." He opened the envelope and scanned the form. "You'll probably be the youngest one there." He looked up. "They won't know what hit them." She leaned gently into him. "I just want to make sure no other kid ever has to scream to be believed." That night, Abena stood alone at her mirror. Her braids were undone, falling in soft threads around her face. She reached into a drawer and pulled out her mother's scarf, the one Natalia had once complimented coldly. It still smelled faintly of lavender, a memory she'd kept alive. She wrapped it gently around her shoulders and looked at her reflection. Not a girl anymore. Not just a survivor, but something quieter, stronger. A witness, a voice. And what the storm had taught her was simple but lasting. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It whispers, it endures, and it never, ever forgets. Spring came slowly that year, the kind that didn't burst through winter but peeled it back layer by layer. In the neighborhood where Frederick and Abena lived, dogwood bloomed along the sidewalks. People opened their windows again, trusting the air to be kind. It had been 3 months since Natalia Hart was sentenced to 30 years without parole. Her name still came up, in op-eds, in university ethics lectures, at uncomfortable dinner tables. But it had begun to fade. As all names eventually do, they found the world had begun to change. Policy reviews, internal investigations, a surge of grant funds redirected from experimental labs toward patient advocacy. But Abena didn't talk much about that. She spent her days between school and piano practice, between calls with her mentor from the ethics forum, and weekend volunteer shifts at the community health center. Her voice had grown quieter, not from fear, but from purpose, like someone who no longer needed to prove she could speak, because now the world had started listening. One evening, Frederick returned from work to find her in the backyard, sitting cross-legged in the grass with a large envelope beside her. He approached slowly. "That looks serious," he said. Abena held it out wordlessly. He sat beside her, slipped the contents free. At the top of the page was the seal of Harvard University. Beneath it, an acceptance letter, full scholarship, pre-medical bioethics track. Frederick blinked, then laughed, then blinked again. "I guess congratulations feels too small." She shrugged gently, smile betraying her pride. "They said they read my forum essay and the congressional testimony, and that it's the kind of voice they want shaping the future." He looked into her eyes, softening. "You already are." They sat together for a while, breathing in the smell of cut grass, listening to the faint trill of a mockingbird, watching the early stars emerge. "You scared me that day," Frederick said after a pause. "At the wedding, when you yelled like that, my first thought was, this poor kid just doesn't want her dad to move on." She gave a small laugh. "And?" he sighed. "I don't blame you. I should have known better." Abena looked at him. "You did eventually. You believed me when it mattered." They shared a long look, no apologies left, no explanations needed, just the quiet bond between a man and a girl who had learned the cost of silence and the strength of choosing otherwise. The night before Abena's graduation, they gathered in the same small living room where, years before, Frederick had first offered her cocoa and an open heart. Close friends, neighbors, even a few folks from the ethics forum joined by Zoom to toast her success. Someone brought lemon bars, another brought a framed photo of Abena in front of the courthouse. She stood near the window, clutching her graduation cap, staring at it as if it were something foreign. "You okay?" A familiar voice asked. It was Fields. He'd flown in from D.C. just for the day, wearing his usual corduroy jacket and scuffed leather shoes. Abena's voice wavered. "I don't know if I'm ready for Harvard, for all of it." He leaned against the windowsill. "No one's ever ready, Abena. Not really. We just step forward and pretend until it becomes true." She let out a shaky laugh. "That's comforting." He grinned. "Good. Now, are you going to tell me about the speech? You're giving it tomorrow." Abena rolled her eyes. "It's not a big deal." "It is to us," he said. She hesitated. "It's about memory, about what we carry, and how it can either crush you or guide you." Fields nodded slowly. "Then you've already said more than most people ever will." The ceremony was held outdoors under a canopy of elms. Families filled the lawn with folding chairs, smiling and leaning forward. As Abena stepped toward the podium, cap square, gown brushing the grass, she carried everything she had learned, every voice she had honored. Here, at that moment, Abena spoke louder than ever. Not just with words, but with presence, courage, and testament. Her voice had changed the world. The folding chairs clapped for names called, tears rolling down cheeks as tassels turned. When Abena was called to the stage, the crowd rose before she even spoke. She took the podium, the sunlight warming her shoulders. "My name is Abena Mensah," she began, "and I'm here not because I planned every step right, but because someone believed me at the moment it mattered most." A hush fell over the lawn. 2 years ago, I was just a girl holding a piece of evidence in her hand, praying someone would look at it. I wasn't brave. I was terrified. But I've learned something since then. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it shows up quietly, in a hand on your shoulder, in a voice that says, "I believe you," in a door that opens when others would rather slam it shut. She paused. "And sometimes justice is a little black girl in a blue dress who refuses to sit down." The applause came slowly at first, then built, like rain gathering before a storm. But this time it wasn't a storm of fear. It was thunder for hope. Afterward, she walked off stage and found Frederick waiting. He didn't say anything at first, just wrapped her in the tightest, longest hug he'd ever given. Your mom would have been proud, he whispered. Abena closed her eyes. I hope so. She would, he said again. I know it. Years later, people would still tell Abena they remembered that speech. That moment. Some would approach her at conferences or in hospitals, saying they entered their field because of her. She would smile, shake hands, thank them, but she never stopped remembering where it all began. Not with a courtroom, not with a handkerchief, not even with a scream, but with the quiet choice to speak, to risk being doubted, to stand when standing meant everything. And when she walked the halls of the hospital she'd later help lead, now with her name etched on a placard outside the pediatric ethics department, she carried in her pocket not a stethoscope or an ID card, but a folded photo of her and Frederick, arms around each other on that graduation day. On the back, in her handwriting, for the man who taught me what it means to be believed, and for the silence we broke together. Because justice may sleep, but it always wakes, and when it does, it remembers who stayed awake for it.